Uh, how's it going, everyone? Before welcome to Heliopolis Radio. We've been fortunate enough today to be joined by Dr. Mark Weisman. He's a fully initiated Celtic and Norse Shaman. He also has prior Christian roots. So if I understand and I recall, it's more than 10 years of experience within studying Christianity and various, now obviously transitioning into Norse and Celtic spirituality. I just wanted to ask maybe if you could start by letting people know who you are, what you do, and how you got into this craft. Not even this craft, but this way of life more specifically.
Good point. Well, my name, as you mentioned, is Dr. Mark Weisman. I am a Celtic Norse Shaman here in South Central Alaska. Primarily, most of what I do is I use many of the ancient teachings, particularly those of cooperation and harmony, peace, and to help servicemen and women returning from combat duty or other people involved in traumatic psychological issues, help them to kind of get their life back, help them to kind of sort out all the emotion and the confusion, and just help them to reestablish some form of peace, some form of normality, help them to build coping mechanisms that they can learn to manage their own PTSD or other outbursts, emotional lack of control. So that's what I do, and I wrote a book about all of the knowledge that I use, all this ancient knowledge, to hopefully give people some ideas as to how to connect their own spirituality, because we know spirituality is the center of all of our health, right? Mm-hmm. When our spiritual core is healthy and it's doing good, we find that our physical and our mental states are more apt to be in line with that, and therefore can provide that peace. And so we just use some of these ancient teachings to help people to kind of recognize that, not really converting anyone or going down the religious side of the equation, but more or less dealing with the spirituality and how do we connect with our own and use it to our benefit.
And specifically, just coming back to that point, what aspect of, because if I understand, the Norse were more Germanic and the Celtics were closer to the Irish, right? So I'm just wondering.
Actually, you got part of it right.
Okay.
Actually, you got most of it right. But if you go further back in history, we find that the Celts actually stem from the Iberian Peninsula, which is today's Spain, southern France. Wow. And so they migrated as the Roman Empire kind of took over all of Europe at one point. The Celts kind of migrated kind of northeast on into certainly what was the Germanic area there, further north into the Scandinavia. So Celts, and then there's a whole another stream of Celts that will go to Ireland, certainly celebrating vows, as well as to Scotland. We find a strong Celtic association there throughout the United Kingdom, but we're very prominent in northern parts of Scotland.
And do you think, in terms of how you help people recover from things like PTSD and trauma, the Celts and the Norse had a strong connection to nature and trusting in its healing powers? So it wasn't really. Yes, sorry, you go ahead.
No. You're spot on. You're spot on there. In that, when nature provides that energy, they're just spiritual entities as well. And so as we use that energy and as we bind with that energy, that's what provides the healing with us. So to your point, exactly right. Nature and our connection to nature is what provides that healing, can provide us with that energy to actually do that healing for us.
And so I was just wondering, because I know I'm familiar, it's interesting because, Norse mythology is kind of sensationalized in today's, publications. But I always used to find it interesting how within various cultures, there was always a typical trinity that you would find somewhere, and there's a commonality between it. So I know, at least in Egyptian mythology, you'd have Ra, Osiris, and I think Horus. And then you'd have the Hindu trinity where you shift, you'd have Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. And then, if I recall, I just need to, please correct me, because I do know Odin is seen as a central figurehead, but there are another two that...
Well, he was actually a part of the Aesir. So there are two, in Norse mythology, there are two groups, two clans of gods. One was the Aesir and one was the Vanir. The Vanir had Frey and Freyr, Freya, those god and goddesses, while the Aesir were more physical. You hear more about their physical traits. So you get Thor, who is strength, right? You get Tyr, who is courage. You get much more of a physical side of the gods, whereas the Vanir were more of the farmers, the art, the agriculture, the love, all of those things you find with the Vanir. Whereas the Aesir, where Odin was the chief among those gods, he would have been more warlike because they believed they understood in their day. The Norse would have known that combat was frequent. It was very commonplace. So that's where we find the energy of Odin really applying, is when you get combat and raids or whatever that they would go on. So that's where that part really comes. But they understood also that there was a season for everything. So in Norse real life, so to speak, is we have winter, and winter is kind of the hunker down time where we're just keeping ourselves fed, we're keeping the house together, we're making sure everybody's at least survives the winter. Then you have spring. Spring would be planting. This is when we put all the crops in the ground, and we're going to celebrate that, of course. And then you had the whole summer for this thing called Viking, the activity of raiding and doing the things they did for those clans. But then at the end of the raiding season, the end of the Viking season, they would come home. And they would come home and they had to harvest. They had to get everything ready for the following winter. So you have this balance between the Aesir, you needing those gods and goddesses to support us during the summer while we're out doing Viking stuff. And then you need the Vanir, who would have been kind of more caring for, the harvest and keeping us safe during the winter. So everything had a season.
And a balance and order.
A reason for all of those. Right.
And so, interestingly enough, because when you study the nature of the Crusades and everything, how a lot of ancestral, and it was across many different continents and countries, how a lot of ancestral knowledge was destroyed. I'm just wondering, how did that affect you? Was that a primary thing that maybe brought you to transition back to, studying your ancestral knowledge? Maybe that there's that piece that's kind of missing in you that needs to be kind of reconciled. I find a lot of people, particularly when it's of shamanic initiation, I'm sure you're familiar with the principle of ancestral karma and knowledge, or, that has a very, very strong part in your understanding of yourself holistically. And so as long as that part is missing, you can't fill it with something else. I'm just wondering if that kind of was a factor in making you perhaps...
I would have to agree with you, and I would have to say that's exactly right. As I went in and I accepted my ordination with the Christian church, and I served as a chaplain for the Christian church, there was always a missing part. There was always questions that I couldn't answer. And when we come down to our individual spirituality, it comes down to really two things. And those two things are that it has to make sense in our mind and it has to feel right in our hearts. And if those two things are not working, there's just something they're just not connecting the way we anticipate. That's where we start asking questions, right? And we start trying to question the doctrine and really start digging in deep, and we start trying to find the answers for our doctrine. And when that doctrine no longer serves us and we just can't get where it makes sense, then we kind of have to begin our much wider search. And that's really where I found myself. At the same time that I was in that moment of my life, I was also doing some ancestral research for my mother, doing some genealogy.
Yeah. Wow.
And I found that 3 generations ago, my great-grandmother came to the United States, but she was born in Denmark. And I said, wow, that rings with me. Yeah. And so I started to kind of research her family and start going back through church records. And Denmark is so wonderful is that they have all their records online now, so you can really
you can access
dig deep.
It. Yeah, that's incredible.
So that's the government there. So I started really digging back into her family, and that's where it really started to click. I started to feel connected, and I started to really kind of, a lot of questions started being answered. Now, it didn't make sense to me that I accepted guilt for something I didn't do. I don't mind being guilty for things I do, because I do a lot wrong. So I'm okay with that.
We all do.
Exactly. And I'm okay with that. But one of the, there were some very core questions as I looked at the doctrine for my studies in Christianity that I just couldn't get there. I could not wrap my mind around it. And then as I began this genealogy and I started to do research then on her family, start going further and further back in time, we get to a place where it's like, wow, this really makes sense. It fills those pieces, and now things are aligned, and that's really where I found myself. And so that's kind of where I came back. In January of 2020, I wound up having a vision in my backyard. Wow. Quite accidentally. I mean, it was not something, I wasn't, intoxicated. I wasn't using any drugs or anything. As a matter of fact, I was getting ready to go to bed. And Odin came in and visited me. We met the man face to face.
I see.
And so that was it. That was kind of the signature on the document. I now knew realistically what I was supposed to do and where I was supposed to go.
And it's interesting because I actually have, I think we all go through our own deep spiritual search and inquiry to, like you said, it's really difficult to have that harmony between mind and heart. And it's also interesting because we live in such a, I think our mind gets confused because there's so much that people do. And so I'm wondering, because my family obviously have strong, we were colonized as well. So there's a strong Christian establishment, ultimately, which I have no problem with, to be honest. But what I found difficult in my own self, and I think this is kind of the spiritual test, was to harmonize duality, to harmonize two things that may seemingly be contradictory because of the way they are, and how to make peace with it. So I was going to ask you, because obviously you've been in this journey longer. I'm only 26 years old, so wisdom-wise, you'd be better equipped to answer this. How have you harmonized your past with your present way of life? Obviously, the Christian way of handling life is, in a way, just based on doctrine and principles to some degree. It's slightly different it's different from the way the Norse would, handle their spiritual development or process. So, or maybe you can correct me, but have you managed to kind of eliminate or harmonize the differences between the two, or Like, how have you managed to integrate your Christianic background with now your,
Well, it's, if you stop thinking about one versus the other, and that's, unfortunately, a lot of people have that, because they say, well, you can only be Christian, or you can only be, Islamic, or you can only be Hindu or indigenous or whatever. No, that's just not how spirituality works. It's a perception. It's a perspective of looking at a deity, or looking at an energy source of the universe. So it's like I tell people when they say, well, I worship God, you worship this man named Odin. I do. But could Odin and God technically be the same person? We're just standing on we're looking at that person, an infinite being, from a different perspective. We're just now changing the way we look at it. We haven't changed him or her or they, or however you address your deities. We've just changed the way we look at it. And so when I think about, here's Christianity, it's over in this pile, and here's my Celtic Norse current, and it's in this pile. No, they're one and the same. They're just, now I'm getting a wider view of a infinite being with whom I'm building a relationship with.
100%.
So you're not really, it's not one versus the other. It's just the same thing. You're just looking at it again from a different perspective. And that's, it goes for all things. I have quite a few of my friends are indigenous. Indigenous Americans, Indigenous Australians. I have several friends who are Mongolian, and we all talk, and we say, and we talk about deities, and we talk about spiritual energy and those things, and we all agree that we're all looking at the same puddle, the same thing. We're all looking at the same entity, the same energy. We're just looking at it from different perspectives. And as we begin to accept other people, their beliefs and their perspectives, as we begin to understand how they see their deity, this is where the human experience begins to grow. And this is where we can learn and grow and become, what I like to say, enlightened, because we recognize the idea that perspectives change, and sometimes perspectives change by the hour. I may be Christian at 9 in the morning, and at noon I'm something totally different. And that's okay. It really is okay. And that's where I think a lot of people get, for lack of a better way to put it, they get hung up on the labels that we apply to them. And then they say, oh, you got to be this way, and you got to do this, and and there are those people who put their blinders on, and they say, oh, nope, my way's the only way to look. My way's the only way to see. I don't want your view. I don't recognize your view. Your view is wrong. Why? Because I have these blinders on. And those people, they will struggle. They will struggle to garner that energy, because they're not willing to see the breadth of this entity that we call. And you get a contradiction right at the top of their discussion points, is when you talk about an infinite being. Everyone talks, oh, my God's infinite, my God's infinite. Do you really know what infinite means? And you start having that, and if you start processing that for a moment, you start realizing that, well, yeah, there are other views, and other views are okay. And that's where I think, your duality question, I think that's really where we can land, and we say, it's okay. It's okay to see things differently. It's what makes us who we are. It's if you drill it down, you have every one of us has no physical way of viewing a particular event, a particular object, the same way another person does. because of all the way down to our DNA, go all the way down to the genetics of what we are. We're different than every other person. If you add in then, over our lifetime, we're going to release hormones into our bloodstream that's going to create what our brain interprets as emotion. And those emotions have the potential to modify, to actually alter our DNA. Take that into consideration and move along your journey in life. There's no way two people, even twins, can have the same perspective, because they will change differently and they'll see things differently. And so, we always see they always do tests, the scientists, and they say, oh, okay, everybody watch what happens in this accident or this movie or this little show. Everybody watches it. And of the 10 people in the room, they all have 10 different things of what happened, right? And they go, oh, well, how is it that you are watching the same event, but yet you see it differently? Well, that's where the genetics and this chemistry, because we're using our emotion to translate the actual signals coming across the nervous system into the brain. So we cannot see things exactly the same way as someone else. We just can't. And when we begin to kind of put those pieces together, your point of duality becomes just lessons learned, just things I now know, another perspective I now have.
And would you say in today's world, people have become more hung up on dogmatism because we have these mental armors that we need to protect ourselves from life? Life has its many, many challenges and adversities. It's always challenging the human psyche. And so this world is now, whereas before, I think, I can't speak because I wasn't alive at that time, but it seems that the ancients were more in tune with the natural process of spirituality. They weren't hung up on, today's world is particularly mind-orientated. So people have their dogmatic ways, their belief systems, which they're encouraged to protect so viciously. Whereas, I guess because I think it's a byproduct of the artificial lifestyle we live. Everything is so, it's not as, I guess, I don't know what word to put it, but yeah, you can add on.
You're exactly right. I think that, as we've paved over Mother Earth and we've begun to get away from nature and we've begun to break that relationship, I think that's done a lot more damage than we give ourselves credit for. I think also that you have energy rolling around in the natural world, but then you intercept that energy with cell phones, microwave ovens, cable TV or satellite TV, and all of these other signals. It really can contort the energy that we're able to kind of absorb into our system. And like static electricity or transient electricity getting into, say, your computer or your cell phone, it can wreak havoc in that device. It can cause damage. Why? Because we have no methodology of translating it into the format we needed it. And so in much the same way, as we're absorbing spiritual energy, now we're absorbing a microwave oven, lack of a better way of putting that. And the signal gets all kind of sideways. Our brain just doesn't know what to do with it because the data is coming into our system. And it's been proven time and time again, and science is now catching up, I think, in very good strength, where we're showing that yes, there is an energy transmission between the natural world and the human body, particularly the human psyche. And so these are things that I think, I think we find more, I don't want to say sanity, but maybe a balance by seeing people, meeting people who live like away from everything. They're like out in the woods somewhere. Why? Because now they're not as polluted with the convoluted data, and they're in touch with Mother Earth. And so that energy is just directly coming up into their psyche, so they're able to mend, they're able to heal themselves. Their nights are better because they're able to provide that healing for themselves. And I think, the further we get away from Mother Earth, the further things are going to get worse and worse.
No, I agree with you. I was going to ask, so obviously maybe without divulging too much, so the work that you do with, I guess, what would you call, you'd call them war veterans, but there's actually a specific, people with PTSD, there you go, apologies, So the work that you do with people with PTSD, is it in-person work, or is it actually something that you do virtually that extends beyond the border?
I can do them both.
All right.
Yeah, I work with people both, in person, certainly in the state, and then I work with a lot of people online, typically in wherever they're coming from. Matter of fact, earlier today, I was having a conversation with a gentleman who is in where was he? Oh, France. He was in France, and so had some struggles. So we were talking about how we could get our mind around that and help him get through this.
And so this can be accessed, because I did check out your website and I actually did see one of your YouTube videos. It was the one on the nature of sin, which is quite interesting. It was quite an interesting one, that one. Obviously, we may not have enough time to go into that, but I was going to ask specifically, what would you do in a session? Would you normally just go through a conversation, understanding someone's background, their experience, or what they've gone through? Or do you actually have a certain methodology that you prescribe, such as exercises? Or I know some people say you go and, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't really, there is no kind of set tone. They're going to drive. I'm just there to kind of be the guy in the passenger seat. Tell them when to turn, and I'm the guy who gets to play with the radio, from what I understand. The whole idea, though, the whole idea is not to go back. There is no point in looking back. You're not going that way. You're going forward. So how do we set ourselves up in the future to make, whatever choices we need to make? I have a kind of a methodology that I developed over 20 plus years of doing this, where, the first trick that I teach my friends is they have to stop, and it has to be a dramatic. They have to act it out, right? It's not I just know in my mind I have to stop. No, you want to make a physical gesture, and the reason you're doing it is you're giving yourself energy, because that's what that's going to do, right? It's like beating your chest for a gorilla. I'm ready for whatever comes at me. So it's a physical action, but it's to stop. It's to, before we act, before we do anything, we're just going to stop and then evaluate. And so the acronym I use, because most of the military folks that I work with, they all understand acronyms. It's like their language. And so the acronym I use is SABTA, which is kind of a butchering of it, but it's stop, breathe, think, act. And so we work on their methods of doing each of those steps. How can they do that? Probably in the last, 10 years, somewhere in there, I've also added an S to it. So it's sabtaz. And then the S would just be the support mechanism. Is what support mechanism can we build up? And again, they're going to drive. I'm just simply offering them, questions. And again, I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. and I want to give them the hope and the power, because they have all the energy and all the power they need to make these choices. They just need to do that. So that's really kind of my methodology. I don't like meeting in an office. I like meeting outside, for obvious reasons. Getting out in nature, and I live in Alaska, so it's a beautiful state. So I like getting out and about. But the idea is just you have to we have to not worry about what's caused you to get to this point. Is you're at this point. How do we deal with it? How do we go forward from here? And that's kind of my mentality when dealing with people. And I know a lot of people say to me, I've had a lot of people tell me that it's a no nonsense thing. That I just it's cut and dry. It's don't bring your sob stories, because I won't listen. I don't want to know how you got here. You're here. Let's go forward. Let's move forward. And that's the idea. So.
That's actually, it's interesting, because I actually thinking about it now, because I'm maybe from my own personal journey of just kind of dealing with trauma, the regression aspect is to acknowledge where without, because I've noticed when you go through things that are difficult, our mind can create a shutter behind those traumatic memories, but it's always weird. These things come up at the most inconvenient of times, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what people with PTSD go through. Like, something triggers the memory and if you haven't regressed and actually allowed yourself to acknowledge, without being without indulging the trauma, like you say, without getting lost in it, it makes it much easier to see things and accept them and not let them take over. Because everyone, which we all go through, the nature of life is life will give you it's you have to drink the certain levels of poison to get stronger, and you can't avoid the fact that life is giving you those things. I think what I've realized, a major part of me being able to move forward, was actually being able to accept that, yes, life can do these things to you, or life can break you in certain ways, and you must be able to harmonize and live with that. I think that's the greater test, and I think that's why spirituality exists the way it does, is to make you exist at peace in an inherently chaotic and somewhat difficult existence. Oh, sorry.
And what I find most often is with people is, yes, you're right. You do need to address the emotion, decouple that emotion from the memory. But I think you can do that from a better frame of mind if you keep moving forward. And this, maybe to your point, I love your point, by the way, is not getting lost in it. Is don't let that prevent you from going forward. Don't get so, don't think, you just can't complete this thing unless you do that. That's not the case. You have to live life. And I think one of my greatest gifts I got from a friend of mine was this idea of when you work and you have a stressful job. He says what he used to do, and he started it very early in his career, is that he had a tree outside of his house. And every day he would come home and he would pretend it would be an invisible coat that he wore. And he would go through the motions of taking this coat off and hanging it in the tree. And hanging in the tree was the stresses from that day. And what he would say is, I'm going to leave this here and I'm going to pick it up on my way out in the morning when I go back to work. I'll pick it up and take it with me. And then he would go into his house and visit and be with his family wholeheartedly, 100%, without stress, without worry, without, just be with them. And then in the morning, he would come out and he would make the same gesture. He would go over to the tree and he would take the coat and he would put it on again. And it was at that point he realized that the coat wasn't so heavy when he put it on in the morning. And so what we find is, while time has a certain property that it provides with healing, what time gives us is the energy from Mother Earth, from those around us, particularly those who love us, those who want to be with us. That energy will heal, will begin to heal those wounds. And so we can decouple. It now makes it easier to decouple the emotional memory from the event memory. We can decouple those. And we recognize that there was an event, sure, but it no longer possesses this emotional portion of it that causes triggering or anxiety or stress or depression or all those things that we don't want. We're moving forward. And then we're letting time weaken the binds between the event memory and the emotional memory. And I think it then becomes easier.
So actually, I was wondering, we have less than 1 minute left. I will need to send you another link interview so we can summarize, and then you can share your details for people to contact you. So is it okay if I send you the link on Matchmaker, and then we can finish up in that session? Because I think this one,
Perfect.
Almost. So just give me 2 minutes and I'll resend it to you. But
perfect. I will look forward to it.
All right, so I'll send you the link now. You should see it on your Matchmaker account.
Let me see.
Sending it now.
Okay.
I'm just going to end this meeting real quick and then I'll send it. All right. Give me 2 minutes. 5, 4. So, yes, no, Dr. Mark, thank you so much. Oh, it's Dr. Weisman, sorry. Dr. Weisman, thank you so much for just giving me your time and actually sharing your wisdom. I think it's interesting. You're in the presence of a wise person when in their silence, they actually speak. So, I definitely know that your knowledge translates in ways that, people hopefully will be receptive to. And obviously, I'd actually, it'd be great to have you on the podcast again to talk about a different topic or subject moving forward, maybe more about what you'd be working on, or hopefully if the world isn't too insane, it'll be something of a positive nature. But again, I just wanted to thank you. And I was going to ask if there are any means of contacting you. I know you mentioned you wrote a book. Maybe you could just share details on that, how people could access it. And then I will put the link in the YouTube description and in the, you see a link below in the video as well. So there'll be 2 links.
The best place to start, if you want to get a hold of me or you want to speak with me, I take requests all the time through our website, and that's AK-Ulf-Hefnar. And I'll spell that for your listeners, because it doesn't spell like it sounds. And that's AK-ULF as in Frank, HED as in Delta, NAR.com. And from there, you can kind of get all of our podcasts. You can get, we also have a Patreon site, which has a lot more wisdom and knowledge, and a community that folks can get some one-on-one time. So there's a lot going on there. On the site, you'll also find information about the book. The book, The Turn to Final, is the name of the book, and it's available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and wherever you buy your books. It is about 219 pages. And what I do in the book is I explain all the knowledge that I've obtained through either spiritually channeling or all the research I did for that. And so there's a lot of knowledge in a very very small book. In addition, I also provide some meditation exercises within the book. And what the meditation exercises are designed to do is they're designed to help people understand their own spirituality, not subscribe to a religion, but understand their own spiritual beliefs. And it's very critical because, when, in many places, people say, oh, you're trying to convert me away from Christianity. And no, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help you understand the full breadth of your spirituality, whatever whatever flag you want to fly with is wonderful, as long as you understand and you can use the spiritual energy of that spiritual connection to make you better, to heal you, to help you, and to help others. And as we pass that around, we find more people who are healthy and happy. And you can never go wrong with those types of ingredients, so to speak. So, so the book is available, and you can also get links to it from the webpage as well. So the webpage is kind of our centralized operation, if you will. And it was just re-released yesterday. Yesterday they re-released it, so it's got a brand new face on it. And
Nice.
It looks semi-organized, I think they say. So they handle that. Okay, I'll be there. But you can also find out more information about what an Ulfhefnar is, how that bloodline translates, and the history of it. You can find out more about me and my travels throughout the state and certainly throughout the country. I try to get out and about as much as I can to visit with people and make the world a better place.
No, and again, I'm wishing you all the best moving forward with your project. I trust that the world will definitely benefit from it, especially with the adversities that most people are facing now. They could definitely utilize a spiritual process because at the end of the day, when everything is all said and done, that's really all we have. So thank you so much for extending your time. It'll be really great to have you on again, and we can hopefully do this again. Thanks so much, Dr. Weisman.
Absolutely, you are very welcome. Love and light, my friend.
Thank you so much. Truly appreciate it.